Okay, so I went ahead here and did something a little naughty, which is to basically finish the build without going through the process in real time. And I did that because all I really needed to do was to mount the shocks, right? I had rebuilt those in real time with you guys. And so I did that. I mounted the rear sway bar, and I put the wing mounts on the rear shock tower, and I put a wing on. This is just the wing that I got with the car when I bought the car, but you know, I did buy like a whole new body, wing, and under tray. So in time, when I get around to painting all of that, then I'll mount, you know, the new wing and the body and everything. But basically, this is done. So I you know, in terms of what I showed you guys in real time, that must have been like, let's say 95% of the build. Okay, fine. So now that this is done, that I've completely torn the car down and completely rebuilt it, what do I think of the CAT 3000? This is where it gets a little tricky. In my personal opinion, it is, let's say, interesting but uninspiring. Now, what I mean by that is, from this same era that the CAT 3000 came out, you had other cars with a very similar layout. So, for instance, the Yokomo MR4BX, I believe, that also had sort of a very, you know, mid-motor, front-biased layout with the motor mount in almost the exact same position, saddles in the rear, electronics up front, belt drive, right? Very similar to this. But the way that Yokomo was made and the way all the parts went together, it looked a bit more like a well-put-together B44 that's belt drive. So, you know, these cars represent kind of the transition between your belt drive four-wheel drive buggies and the shaft drive B44s from the mid-2000s. And, you know, if I had to pick between this and the MR4BX, I'd probably take the MR4BX. I think it's a better car. Even though I don't have one myself, I've kind of seen one, and it looks a bit higher quality. The parts look higher quality. The shocks are certainly way better. You know, these Schumacher shocks, like when I put these together, I didn't put too much attention into really making them perfect, because this particular car is probably just going to go on a shelf. But if you can put the effort into these old Schumacher shocks and make them pretty decent, because I have these on my CAT 2000s and they work well. But to be fair, they're not quite as good as other shocks from the day, like the Kyosho shocks. The Losi shocks are pretty good. So, you know, all right, fine. That's kind of a minor point. As far as like how everything goes together, you know, how the differentials go together, how the suspension components go together, you know, assembling the hub carriers, putting the arms on, everything about the Schumacher CATs is a little bit wonky, right? It's not quite straightforward. Literally not quite straightforward, because even the drivetrain itself, the belts are aligned a little bit off angle from the center point of the chassis. For whatever reason, they decided to do it that way. And there's probably good engineering reason for it, probably with how they wanted to align the actual diff pulleys, you know, in a certain way toward the center of the chassis. I don't know, just a guess. But there are some oddities here to this chassis which are interesting, but it makes the whole thing kind of uninspiring in a way that, like, you know, if I wanted to take this racing, I would be a little worried if something broke, because, you know, it would be a little bit more complex to replace a part on this car than it would probably be on the Yokomo MR4BX, or maybe other, who else made a belt drive car from that day? Probably, well, the Kyosho Laser ZXS, right? Which I got one right there. And even though the Kyosho Laser is kind of a complicated car in terms of how the drivetrain's assembled, the suspension components are pretty straightforward. So, you know, will I run a CAT 3000 one day at the Vintage Off-Road Nationals? So remember, I do have two. I have another one here. Maybe. But I don't know if I will put it that high on my list. At least not right now. So, you know, this was an interesting build. Especially, I think for me, you know, also the fact that the previous owner really, like, hacked this thing up with, like, a bunch of Losi parts and, you know, cut the rear tower into 1,000,000 pieces and tried to rebuild his own special tower, which, you know, to his credit, was probably an interesting custom job, but it's also a real hack job. You know, that kind of dampened the experience for me a bit as well. I thought all I really had to do was just take this apart, clean it, and put it back together. Then I had to buy a whole new lower deck because he chopped up the lower deck in such a way that I couldn't, you know, use it. So yeah, you know, and like the way the inner hinge pin mount onto the chassis, I don't know. I just think it's a little weird, a little flimsy. You know, if you had to replace a rear arm, the way you'd have to take this assembly off to get the arm out of the hinge pin and then put a new one on. Not crazy about that. You know, with the front arms, and you know, the CAT 2000 has the same problem as well with the front arms, with how they mount onto that sort of U-type hinge pin thing. That's not so bad, but if that hinge pin piece breaks, that's a real pain to replace. So okay, you know, whatever. I don't know. I don't. Yeah, I'm kind of at a loss for words. I'm sure it's a good car. I know some people have raced them and really like them. I'd have to think a lot about whether or not I want to actually run one of these in the future, considering how I do have a large collection and I already have you know, other vintage four-wheel drive buggies that are quite good. So, you know, maybe I'll install electronics in this CAT 3000 here, just to see how it stacks up against the other cars. You know, maybe it's good, but I do fear that it's like a little fragile. You know, these front arms here are, they have thinner sort of cross braces than even the CAT 2000 arms, which I have more of. So just for that reason alone, I might be more inclined to just keep running my CAT 2000s. So yeah, I don't know, kind of so-so. I do look forward to doing the Laser ZXS and the ZXS Evolution. Because remember, I got 2 of those to do, and that's going to be, to me, probably more fun and interesting. Yeah, I think that's about all I have to say about this car. So I'm gonna, you know, put this on a shelf somewhere, probably in my office for now at least. And then, you know, maybe on this car, I don't think I'll have to tear this one down like completely and rebuild it. It's actually in pretty good shape. All I have to do is just redo the shocks, because the damping on this is a little too stiff for what I would expect to run it on. So I'll change the shocks, or the shock settings, and then find a way to mount lipos on the back there, and maybe put some electronics in this and see how it goes. You know, I assume it'll be good, but yeah, I don't know. I really don't know what else to say about this car. It was okay. I guess it was okay. I wouldn't rate it very highly in my build experiences, but I'm glad that I was able to at least make a build series for you that was kind of like in real time, so you could see how the process actually goes for rebuilding a car like this that's kind of older and, you know, wasn't very well kept. There's a lot that goes into it, right? You're spending most of your time finding a little screw or a nut or a little part or a clip or something, right, to finish that component of the build, and you're not spending quite as much time actually building the car, right? If you have all the parts brand new and lined up in a row, then this will be a much easier build. But you don't have that, right? It's an older car. You got to sift through all these parts boxes and try to figure out, okay, do I have the part? Where is it? Where did I put it? So, you know, that I hope that piece of the build series gave you guys some more transparency into what it's like to restore these cars. And then you look at the collection I have and you see how many times I've done this. You know, that should give you a sense of how much work I really put into my collection. So yeah, I think that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed the process. I know the videos didn't get a whole lot of views compared to other videos I usually do, but it does appear to be that The people who did watch those videos are really into them. So whether or not I would do the same kind of thing again for like the Kyosho Laser ZXS, I'm not entirely sure about. Maybe. We'll see. We'll see about that. But, you know, first I have to, because I'm not even ready to start that build yet, because I have to go to the Vintage Nationals this coming week. That's in less than a week. So I'm still preparing for that. Then when I get back from that, I got to put everything away and then get started on the lasers. I do have some parts coming in for the ZXS Evolution, which I will get to in another video. I'll tell you more about that later. So thanks for watching.